When the train screamed to a halt at Pine Ridge, Wyoming, they claimed a man would be waiting for her, but nobody was there. Called her name. With her dress ripped at the hem, Grace Whitmore staggered down the iron stairs. On the white fabric covered in blood and dust, one sleeve tore cleanly off. She had lost her parasol. When the train lurched once more, it must have rolled beneath the seat. Between the final carriage and an unforgettably vivid nightmare, her hat trampled. Only an hour had passed since it had occurred. At a tiny intersection, the train had come to a stop. Laughing and smelling of whiskey, 3 inebriated people boarded the ship. The males forcefully pushed an elderly traveler back into his seat when he attempted to stand between them. Unaware of the sounds, the conductor may be in a different vehicle farther up the queue. She pushed him with all of her strength when he went for her skirt. At that moment, the train's wheels screamed as it pushed ahead. She grabbed her carpet bag and sprinted into the next car after using that unexpected shock to force him into the seat. She was struck across the arm by the slap, resulting in a bruise that would turn purple before the day was over. The smooth white fabric smeared with blood and grime was torn by her sleeve. The majority of passengers turned away, acting as though they couldn't see or hear. Her hands trembled as she staggered back into her seat after breaking free, just as the whistle blasted once more. Her heart was beating against her ribs and her breath was raspy. She was now shaky, her body trembling, her spirit just hanging on, her dignity in ruins. The platform glistened in the midday sun, and the scorching July wind burned her face. She was about to vanish when a deep voice shouted out from the darkness. "Grace Whitmore, you turned," and he was there. Tall and broad-shouldered, 46-year-old Colt Mallister had a scar across his cheek and a battered hat that covered his eyes the color of thunderclouds before rain. His hands appeared to be made for both work and forgiveness. After glancing at her ripped garment, he remained silent, just draped his coat over her shoulders after taking it off. Even though the gesture was quiet and straightforward, it caused her to feel something. "You're Colt," she said to him. He gave one nod. "You came a long way for a man like me." Her voice was hardly firm as she said, "I came for a promise." After examining her, he gestured to the wagon that was attached close by. "Let's get you off this platform." Dust rose behind them like smoke from an ancient fire as the wheels squeaked as they rolled away from the deserted station. Grace sat in silence, holding onto his coat while the smell of tobacco and leather grounded her. She eventually questioned, "Did you write all those letters?" Colt gripped the rein with tighter hands. "Most were written by my brother. He died in the previous winter." Grace's eyes blazed. For a ghost, she had traveled across the nation. And now, sitting next to a man who has been carved out of grief. She understood that the West wasn't a fantasy. It served as a test. But as he mentioned her name, there was something in his voice that made her heart skip a beat. Because she would meet his gaze and say the things that no woman had ever dared to say before Summer's death. "Give me everything you have." However, what does that mean to a girl fleeing hell and a damaged man? Wheels screaming over sun-baked stones, the wagon shook over the gravel road, with his coat still slung over her shoulders. Grace sat quietly next to Colt. She moved farther away from cowboy love stories and terror with each mile. Deeper into something she didn't comprehend, though. The lush and gold expanse of the land stretched beyond her wildest expectations. Colt gestured once in the direction of the horizon. "That's where I am. Ain't much to look at, but she's mine." As they arrived at the ranch, Grace noticed a barn with half of its planks missing, a little cottage sagging from years of use, and a field of corn struggling to survive in the parched ground. Nevertheless, the air had a fresh scent. Colt, who was free, gently put his rough hand around her waist and assisted her in getting down. Her heart skipped a beat when she felt that fleeting touch. Everything in the cabin was straightforward. A coffee pot that was older than she was, 2 chairs and a table. Black as sin, Colt poured her a cup and warned her, "You drink it or it'll drink you." For the first time that day, she let out a quiet laugh. It felt human, but it wasn't hilarious. He then motioned for her to accompany him outside after approaching the window and taking out an old measuring tape. "You see this dirt?" he asked while on his knees. 11 in deep. That's what's good. The kind that with proper care will provide us with food. Grace gazed, absorbed in contemplation. He spoke with such dignity and gravity that the words became entangled in her thoughts. Her faces burned. She believed he was referring to something else, something outrageous, something that made her heart race. She took a step back while holding onto her skirt. "Mr. Weston Stories, Mallister, I came here to get married." "Not for that." Colt blinked. Then a warm, deep laugh spilt from his chest. "No, ma'am, Lord, I was discussing the land." Grinning, he held up the tape measure. "The earth is 11 inches deep, not me." Grace paused, then gave a tremulous laugh of her own. For the first time, the terror in her eyes changed to something more hopeful. Colt murmured softly, "You stay," as the sun dropped below the hills, turning the sky orange. "Together, we construct this. You leave. You have the ticket back." Grace gazed at the vast field that was illuminated by the last of the day's light. 11 inches of soil. Perhaps luck is on your side. She was unaware, however, that a secret buried far deeper than that dirt would be revealed by nightfall. Like an old memory attempting to enter, the wind howled outside the cottage that night, shaking the windows. Grace had trouble falling asleep. She listened to the crackle of the fire and the rhythmic beat of Colt's boots pacing on the wooden floor, while she lay awake listening to the Wild West Stories podcast. She had not before noticed the limp with which he moved. It seemed as though each step had more weight than just pain and bone. He froze by the window, gazing into the darkness as she eventually sat up. She whispered, "You always walk like that?" Without turning, he grinned. "Rodeo mishap. I was tossed in 93 by Bull. Since then, I've been paying rent for my limp." She smiled at something in his voice, not sympathy but respect. He was a proud man who had been shaped by both hard work and misfortune. She discovered him cutting wood outside the following morning, shirtless, with the sun shining on every hair on his back. She averted her gaze, but not fast enough. Colt noticed that she was staring. "You have a chop wood, city girl?" "No, but I've broken hearts." The distance between them didn't feel as thick for a moment as he let out a low, startled laugh. Weeks passed quickly, drawing them closer to one another without either of them exchanging words. Grace discovered how to prepare beans that didn't taste like boot leather, milk the cow and hang washing in the Wyoming wind. She began humming once more, only small tunes she could recall from Boston. Colt demonstrated how to aim his antique rifle, stating that all Wyoming women should be able to frighten a coyote away. She admired the way he stood right behind her, sturdy as a mountain, but she never fired. Colt would occasionally join in, humming off pitch, and they would both giggle until their sides ached. However, even after the laughter subsided at night, Grace continued to wake up from dreams about the train, hands clutching and mocking voices. She let forth a scream, but the whistle broke it. Occasionally, Colt would see her trembling by the fire and simply serve her coffee without saying anything. He never inquired as to what transpired. He simply remained. He spoke quietly one evening as the sun set behind the hills of Wild West romance films. "You are aware that you owe me nothing. You can depart at any moment." She murmured to him, "Maybe I'm not here because I owe you. Perhaps I'm here because this is the first location that seems genuine to me." He didn't answer. With his gaze fixed on the horizon, the same horizon that was gradually uniting their hearts, he merely gave one nod. Grace understood deep down that this quiet man was still concealing a secret that was more significant than any piece of property, a reality that might shatter their hearts before the harvest arrived. "So, dear friend, stay right there. Pour a cup of hot tea for yourself. Tell me what time it is in your location and from what part of the world you are listening. Additionally, click the small subscribe button if you want to know how this narrative develops, so you don't miss the following action." The ranch began to transform around the middle of July. The maize rose in elevation. Grace noticed that she was grinning more than she had in years as the fields grew golden in the sunlight. She had become accustomed to the fragrance of coffee sitting by the fire every morning, the sound of Colt's boots on the porch at twilight, and the way he cleared his throat before bidding good night. His silence was soothing, like sitting next to a powerful river that you could understand without having to cross. However, deep things are hidden, even by rivers. When Grace went looking for him one afternoon, she discovered Colt kneeling by a little wooden cross that was partially buried in the ground next to the far fence. He failed to notice her. His hand traced a name etched into the wood as his hat rested on the ground. A tiny tin locket caught the afternoon light as it hung from the cross. A boy's inward smile, weakened by time and the sun, was visible to Grace. Tim Mallister. She stopped. The final letter she received before moving to the West was signed with that name. She believed that all of those kind messages were written by the same man. She saw Colt's shoulders shake once before becoming still. She believed that all of those kind messages were written by the same man. She saw Colt's shoulders shake once before becoming still. His eyes were crimson from dust, or perhaps from remembrance, as he eventually turned. He made no effort to conceal it. I was never supposed to meet you. Grace, the man he desired me to be, not me. Prior to his illness, my brother composed such letters. He desired for someone to have faith in this location. Have faith in me. Grace's chest constricted. The words stuck behind her tongue, even though she wanted to say anything. You told me a falsehood, she muttered. He gave a nod. Yes, I did. Not for what you believe, though. I didn't desire sympathy. I simply did not want his dream to be buried with him. The long grass was stirred like restless ghosts by the wind. Grace took a step forward, her hand shaking. She had the option to leave at that moment, but something more profound kept her motionless. You don't have to bear his dream by yourself, she remarked. Colt glanced down at the first touch that felt more like belonging than mercy, her hand resting on his arm. Neither of them moved for a considerable amount of time. The prairie appeared to hold its breath as well. The dust on the roof was washed away by the sudden heavy rain that night, which also filled the air with the fragrance of damp dirt. As she listened, Grace wondered if forgiveness could flourish in such deep soil. However, something far darker would emerge from the same earth by daylight. For weeks, they didn't see rain until that evening. The soil was as dry as bone and had broken open by the middle of August. With each inhale, the dust stuck to her throat and the maize curled brown, transforming the air into something they could chew but not swallow. Every living thing on the Mallister ranch started to get thirsty as the well dipped to a whisper. Grace made an effort to be optimistic. As she worked and carried buckets from the creek, she sung, but the water level decreased every day. Colt didn't say much, but his face was already deeply wrinkled from the worry. His attitude worsened along with the limp in his step. Colt hitched the wagon and rode towards town when the creek eventually ran to muck. Hours later, he came back with a tense jaw and stern gaze. The water is being retained by them. They assert that prior to his passing, my brother owed them money. He remarked, I suppose they're now collecting water and debt. The brook was dammed by the northern ranchers. Said we ain't part of their circle no more. Grace gaped in disbelief. But you helped them build that bridge last spring. Bitter as old whiskey, Colt chuckled once. Yeah, funny how friendship dries up faster than a well. He retreated when she reached for him, sitting on the porch and gazing out to sea. Like the vast sky, the quiet between them extended. Grace composed a letter that evening that she never mailed. She talked about loneliness and how even the strongest men might break down due to fear. She then tore it up and went outside, where the fields were illuminated by a low crimson moon. Colt was standing beside the barn, with his eyes fixed on the stars and his shoulders slumped. He said, Perhaps I shouldn't have brought you here. Everything I cherish is destroyed here. Her voice trembled as she took a step closer. Then let's engage in combat. Let's combat the drought and the land. If we must, the damn people as well. Colt gave her a look. He gave her a serious look, and his eyes briefly glowed with rage. You would defend me against Pine Ridge as a whole, she grinned. If I had to, I would take on the entire West. The air changed at that very moment. Like a warning from the gods, lightning flashed in the darkness far away. Men were spitefully whispering Colt's name somewhere. and the impending turmoil would try every ounce of the 11 he had left. As storms don't always come out of the sky, on occasion it rides directly in your direction. By the 3rd week of August, the ground was begging for water as the heat returned with more intensity. Even the breeze lost its ability to sing, and the crops drooped like weary souls. Grace observed Colt pacing the porch, his eyes focused on the dry brook, mute and unyielding. He appeared to be a man using his bare hands to try to hold the entire planet together. She brought 2 cups of coffee with her one evening and placed one next to him. She said, "Tell me what you're thinking." He took a while to respond. At last, his tone became low and harsh. "I'm constantly asking myself if it's worthwhile, this battle and this land. Perhaps some dreams are destined to end." With her hands encircling the cup, Grace leaned forward. "Colt, no, dreams never die. Individuals simply cease to believe, and what sustains a place is belief." He glanced at her, then stared closely. The heat caused her face to flush. Her neck was matted with her hair. Her eyes, however, were as bright as a prairie fire. She grinned. "You informed me that this dirt was 11 inches deep, and that with enough effort, anything might grow there. Perhaps water isn't what it needs most at the moment. It might be faith." Her strength caught Colt off guard, and he blinked. And something changed at that precise instant. The despondency broke first, but the drought persisted. In an attempt to preserve what crops they could, they dug ditches the following morning. As they watched, neighbors whispered. However, Grace continued. She demonstrated her defiance with each handful of dirt she hurled, serving as a constant reminder that giving up was never the solution. She was standing next to Colt as the sun went down, both of them drenched in perspiration and dust, and her voice was steady but quiet. "Colt, you have no control over the rain. However, you have power over the internal conflict. The stubborn are rewarded in the West, not the powerful." He grinned slowly and wearily. "I suppose we'll blend in perfectly then." Grace chuckled. "I suppose we will, and perhaps, my buddy, that is the true lesson. Dig deeper when life seems to be draining you. Plant your roots even when others turn their backs on you, because sometimes faith is the only thing that will ever reign." Press that like button if you had any feelings, and subscribe to avoid missing what transpires when Pine is eventually hit by the storm.